My day job and that of my team is to look after impact funding in Durham. That provides grant support for our research outputs to be transferred for the benefit of business and society and outside academia. One of the pots of funding we manage is from the Economic and Social Research Council, or ESRC, which is now heavily committed to transferring social science research, not just into local authorities and the charity sector, but also directly into businesses for their commercial advantage. And it's all in line with the industrial strategy. Number one of the four grand challenges in the industrial strategy is artificial intelligence and data. AI and machine learning are already starting to transform the global economy. They can be seen as new industries in their own right, but will change existing businesses across many sectors and deploy vast data sets to identify better ways of doing complex tasks. From helping doctors to diagnose medical conditions more effectively, to allowing people to communicate across the globe using instantaneous speech recognition or translation software. There's a vast array of things that can be done with AI. And that brings me to my first message, really. We are after collaboration. And if you feel, as businesses here, or other universities present, that there are opportunities to use research which we may already have done and to take part in, and have research outputs from, then we could transfer those into a business to their commercial advantage, and we could even probably find some grant support to help to do that. So that's the first message, that we may already have things that are of value to you. So there may be advantages in using the outputs of existing research, but we want businesses also to inform the direction of our social science research from the start and collaborate in it. And in this context, the North East and Northern Ireland Doctoral Training Partnership, I know it's a big mouthful, but their logo is on the left at the bottom there, the 9 DTP, can help. This is a Durham-led and ESRC-funded centre which funds over 50 PhDs per year, and they could be supervised by any one of the North East universities, or indeed the Northern Ireland universities as well, which is where 9 comes from, obviously. The 7 universities that make up the 9, it's a bit confusing. But we'd be delighted for you to do that, to participate in helping us to frame the research over a long period of time. But also, maybe you could use in the short term, you could offer a placement to a PhD student who could help you in your business straight away. Now, there's more to say on that, but Stuart Gladwell at the back there, I'll give a shout out to. He runs the 9 DTP, and if you're interested in PhD studentships, then he's the man to talk to today. Today's event is very much about question and answers. You can see the format evolve in a minute. I must say I've got masses of questions about AI and society. Is artificial intelligence ahead of the public's ability to accept it? At what point do machines make decisions about medical matters rather than providing decision support? When you get to my age, that becomes increasingly important. Where are the ethics in all this, and how do we incorporate ethics into the AI models? We think the best answer is in sorts of questions that come around multidisciplinarity, where we can put physical scientists and social scientists and businesses together for their advantage. And that's partly what today is about. So we want to have a great debate on the opportunities and the challenges that this presents. And please do ask our panel any questions you like. I'm saying this because I'm not on the panel. Later on, when we open it up to the floor. Before closing, I must thank our sponsors, the Economic and Social Research Council through the 9 partnership and also through a thing called Business Boost. They sponsored this event today, but also the Institute of Physics funded us today as well. Institute of Physics, what's physics got to do with artificial intelligence and with social science? Well, physics is very possessed of data-intensive science. Obviously, in Durham, for example, we have a big physics department. There's a huge team of research around data-intensive science where we work with businesses. So I was very pleased that the Institute of Physics were able to help us to fund today. Now, during the event, I'm probably standing in front of you now, do tweet the hashtag AI Society event is there for you. And that's quite enough for me, so I'll hand you over to Phil Jackman, who is the director of Guerrilla Working, who's going to facilitate the event. I hope you enjoy the afternoon, learn something maybe, and hopefully we can collaborate to resolve some of the challenges we're about to discuss. Yeah.
And can I thank you for keeping the dress code up? I don't think we got the memo, did we? No. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Phil Jackman. As Peter said, I'm the director of Guerrilla Working. I am the one and only original guerrilla worker, but that's perhaps for another day. I've also got involved in a number of other organisations which are kind of relevant to today. One is I'm involved in Dynamo Northeast, which is the organisation that's trying to grow the tech industry across the region with some great success, and so clearly AI has a role to play in that. But I'm also involved in an organisation called the Northeast Initiative on Business Ethics. We're trying to position the Northeast as a great place to do ethical business, AI, ethics. Well, I'm sure those are the questions that will come up from today. But once upon a time, a long time ago, not in a galaxy far, far away, but a long time ago, Thomas Watson, who was the president of IBM, said, I think there's a world market for maybe 5 computers. Okay, this was a long time before I was born. But when I was at school, we hardly no computers. When I got to university, yes, I did go to university, the only technology I came across was the tape recorders in the language labs. Today, though, of the 5.5 billion adults that are out there, 4.4 billion of them have a computer in their hands, more powerful than what was used around on the moon. Back in the 70s and 80s, if we needed cash, we'd write a check with our own personal encryption device. Now, with the $60 trillion that are in circulation, 50 trillion of it never appears anywhere other than some electronic ledger. So the vast majority of money that we think is just electronic. The reason I'm telling you this, though, is because the world is a very different place from when I was young. And technology has played the biggest role in this change, I think. Now, I came to technology quite late. I was in my 30s, but I've been in senior roles for over 25 years in both the private and public sector. I don't have a technical background. It's not the kit that excites me, but rather what it can do for people, what technology can do for people. Technology is built by people, to be used by people, for the benefit of people. And this is the context in which we're going to talk about artificial intelligence today. So the theme of the event is the value of AI in social sciences, and vice versa, the value of social sciences and AI. We've got 4 panel members who are each working within the field of AI and social science from different backgrounds and perspectives. I'll introduce them and then ask them to introduce themselves a bit further when they come. So we've got Noura, who's Assistant Professor in the Department of Computer Science at Durham University. Her main research interest is unsupervised deep learning, natural language processing, and optimization. Unsupervised anything is okay for me, that's great. I've got Pete Daykin, for some reason sitting at the back, but there you go. And, so he's Chief Executive of Word Nerds. We use advanced linguistic techniques, artificial intelligence, and the human brain to answer 2 questions. What problems do customers will have our product, and why might they buy our products? So that'll be interesting. Phil Garnett, a lecturer in operations management at York Management School. His area is systems theory, complex systems theory. Is that ordinary systems theory as well? Yeah. And network analysis techniques to allow us to understand organizations and how they operate. And finally, Ahmed from a small company just around the corner called Sage, yeah, one of the biggest companies in the tech scene in the UK. One of the very few FTSE companies in tech, and certainly I think the only FTSE 100 company with its head office in the Northeast. So there you go. Okay, can I ask the panelists to come up, please? Right, so give it some words. Just me. Is it my magnetic personality? my feedback right now.
Luke's up there, asking.
Hello. Is this okay? Right, okay, good, that's great. Okay, so we'll start the end and well, if you could just give a bit more introduction to yourself.
Sure. Hi everyone. Yep. So as said, I'm a lecturer at York Management School, and my background's quite different from what you might expect actually. So I did computer science and biology as degrees and a PhD in computational biology, and I have practical experience in AI and machine learning, lots of neural networks for pattern matching, optimization problems, and I also worked for quite some time on artificial immune systems, which are another form of machine learning algorithm. In the context of this, so beyond my kind of interest in systems and complex systems, I do a lot of work on the influence of AI in decision-making processes within organizations. So how decisions are made with people and computers together. And within that, I'm quite interested in things like corporate surveillance and AI in the security domain. But I'm also, so that's my sort of critical scholar of AI and how it's used in organizations. But I'm also kind of a consumer of AI as well. So I use AI techniques to help analyze my research data, things like natural language processing, which I think you'll hear about. But also increasingly quite interested in what AI might do for teaching within universities as well. So that's another way that I'm sort of both a scholar but also a user potentially of AI.
Noura?
I'm Noura. I'm assistant professor in Durham University. So my main interest is machine learning and its applications for real world. So whether it's security applications, natural language processing, in psychology by computer interfaces, and also in healthcare. Mainly working with companies, startups in the Northeast and in England to support them build AI-powered, machine learning-powered solutions for their problems, as well working with some government bodies to help develop the tools and educate the public and these institutions about the importance of AI and the challenges they will face while using them.
Excellent. Ahmed?
Thanks very much. So I'm Ahmed Salhin. I'm a principal data scientist at Sage. If you don't know Sage, it's at Sage we are like developing accountancy and finance and business software for businesses, mainly focusing on the commercial side businesses. I've been with Sage for more than 2 years. Before that, so what I do at Sage, I mainly developing machine learning services to help our customers be more productive, more effective, like in running their businesses, and also increasing the efficiency that they have. Before that, I was a social scientist. I was like doing mainly work around finance and behavioral finance. So I did my PhD in behavioral finance, trying to understand how the emotions of investors and how that predict stock market returns, and was doing like some financial consultancy over the last 15 years, beside being a social scientist. So machine learning and data science was a tool that I used to support all my work, and I see it as a very powerful tool to get data and to analyze data to support decisions. That's it.
Thank you, Ahmed.
If you haven't heard us Sage, what you like. Firstly, apologies for sitting at the back. I was going to sit at the front, but I lost a secret game of musical chairs with a chap called Ed Lucky who nipped into that seat before I could get there. So thanks, Ed. See me after. So my name's Phil Jackman.
Before you get on there, can I just say Ed was his fault that I'm here, so yeah, absolutely.
So my name's Phil Jackman. I am CEO of a company called Word Nerds. Word Nerds basically helps brands and organizations deal with the large quantities of unstructured text data written about them by their customers and potential customers. My background is in running digital agencies. I ran a digital agency for 15 years and then accidentally stumbled across this whole brave new world of AI and deep learning and natural language processing, in which capacity we are very much leaning on the floating brain in a tank that is Noura and her PhD students who are doing some great stuff for us. I am almost certainly the most stupid person on this panel. I know less than everybody else about AI and machine learning and deep learning. And I nearly didn't come today because my little boy saw the Institute of Physics thing. He's 8 and he said to me, he said, "Daddy, don't go." He said, "You can't trust atoms, they make up literally everything." Which I was quite proud of. That's a pretty stellar gag for an 8-year-old, and I said I was going to nick it, and I attributed it. I'm also a lapsed social scientist, so back in the dark days of 1998, I read geography, mainly kind of environmental geography and a bit of post-colonial states, remember them, still going now, and I haven't lifted a textbook in anger in the intervening however many years it is. So I've got 2 interests in here and know nothing about either.
Very well, thank you very much for that. And you may well be the least talented member on this panel because I'm not on the panel. So. You okay with that? Is it one of these other microphones that's causing the problem, do you think? No, okay. You may wonder why I'm still talking with the guy up there. So I think the way that this works is that I've got some really clever questions to ask, and that's going to floor the panel. We'll do that in a sort of round robin way. I'll strictly come down simply where each panel member gets a chance to speak. But please, if you've got any questions, then at the end we'll have a quite long session to get engaged and get out of this what you want today. So, are you ready then? Yeah. Good. Well, my first question is, come on, there's nothing really such as AI, is there? It's all made up. It's actually just human intelligence applied to a machine. So come on, tell me, is there really such a thing as AI, and what does it mean to you in your work? So let's start at the end.
Is there such a thing as AI? I would say not yet, but there could be. So I think that, so one of the things I'm quite interested in is actually where the term AI is used, and it's used in very diverse contexts. I'm sure we'll discuss a bit more of this as the afternoon goes on, but often things that are not what I would call AI, which is a human-like intelligence implemented within a machine, that I don't think exists so much yet. There isn't something that can make kind of any kind of intuitive or creative leaps within a computer that I've seen yet. We may hear a different story in a minute. But I think it's quite interesting that the term AI is actually used for quite mundane technologies quite a lot, that are just doing quite sort of, just quite normal statistical analysis. But one of the big things that I think we see is pattern matching, and that's often attributed to being AI. And that is, machines have got very good at being given a kind of a pattern of what something might look like a behavior, or like your face in an image, and then they're very good at matching that with other faces or other behaviors, and that's often what is called AI, or part of what is called AI. So I think in the future, will we go through something called a singularity, where machines sort of get much more human-like intelligence or consciousness? Potentially, I think we might, but I don't think we're there yet. So I'll leave it there for now. I'm sure we'll come.
So almost, but not quite.
Well, quite far away, but
yes,
edging that way.
I hear you can't even get a computer to recognise what a cat is. Yeah, so there you go. Okay, that's right. Noura, have you?
I have to disagree, sorry. So I think AI made me arrive on time today because I took South Shield turn instead of sticking to A1. Using SatNav, everybody using SatNav, it's based on AI. Everybody is typing texting, right? Texting, social media, word recommendations, that's powered by AI. Home assistant devices, speech recognition. You call your bank, you have your answer machine telling you press blah blah blah, press say yes, say no. That's AI based. Everything, even in supermarkets, how products are sorted on shelves, that's powered by AI. So it is here. We can't I think we can't ignore its existence anymore. We use it in our daily life, whether we recognize that yet or not. Yeah, and I think it's here to stay.
Excellent, thanks.
Yeah, so well, I think it's the broader definition of AI that it just mimicking humans. We are so close to get like some of our abilities in AI, but not there yet. So if we think about our abilities as physical, mental, you would argue psychological as well, that we have psychological ability, and to make that into like AI eventually, it's really hard. It's not an easy job. We have made like very successful attempts. We did lots of all these technologies that Noura just like mentioned, but still to reach the point that we add the intelligence that comes in the mental and the psychological, it's still far-fetched. Like it's still some time to reach that point in the future, and add to the complexity how the AI agents will interact with each other. So if we have this ability, so it's really difficult to mimic it, but what's impossible, but what seems impossible to mimic is the interaction between all of us, which would be different interaction, and like the number of combinations and permutations of things would be really high. So I think it exists. We are not there yet to have what we think it's AI.
So, one thing that's clear so far is it depends on your definition of AI, and there are different definitions. I think the one that most people outside of academia use is anything that you would expect a human to be able to do, getting a computer to do it. And that means that things like pocket calculators in their day were AI. And I think this is one of the problems.
One of those.
I think this is one of the problems with AI. We think of AI as a very sort of space age thing that's in the future, whereas AI has probably been with us for a few decades already. And we are we're very quick to dismiss things that we already understand. So pocket calculators aren't particularly sexy now, so we don't really think about it as AI, but at the time they were transformative. So I think AI definitely does exist. I think for a lot of the reasons that Noura articulated, we're seeing it every day. The other side of your question is interesting. To what extent is it just humans replicating their behaviour in computers? I think at the minute we have something called narrow AI. Apologies if this is granny sucking eggs territory for people out there, but obviously there's different types of AI. Narrow AI is AI that deals with just very specific things in certain rule sets. So you might be able to teach an AI to beat the world's Go champion at Go, but that algorithm can't then drive your car home. And so at the minute AI is pretty stupid. In the future there's a lot of talk about when narrow AI becomes general AI and more expansive in what it can do, and you can then start having systems that are learning how to do multiple things. At that point it becomes really, really useful. And then if we ever get to the point of the singularity and robots taking over the world, at what point does it become super AI that's much more intelligent than us? And I think the interesting thing about narrow AI in particular is the way that it's been put together so far is it's generally been trained with data that we've put in, and as such it is prone to all of the biases that we as human beings bring to the table. So you've got things like Microsoft Tay, which in 2016 tried to speak to a bunch of teenage American girls on Twitter, and within 24 hours of going live became hugely racist. You've got a Facebook algorithm that was trained to negotiate the best deal in a head-to-head negotiation with another bot, and that got taken offline when it started to develop its own language. If you download Google Images and stick it into an AI in a minute and say, what does a doctor look like? It'll almost certainly come back to say, well, it's male, white, and actually nurses are female and potentially more ethnically diverse. And so it's fundamentally flawed in that sort of in that way, because we bring to the table the nonsense of being a human being.
Excellent. Well, thanks for those. Those really good answers. I think, suppose it depends upon your perspective. What I think get hung up is on the industry of artificial intelligence, perhaps artificial creativity. So when I was young, I used to get a big egg box, and that would be a boat or a plane, take it on some magic places, and nothing but a long way from a machine being able to do that yet, and that sort of creative spark that we have. So as a zoologist, the time to worry is when machines start breeding. Yeah, once they discover sex, then we really are screwed, but there you go. Anyway, Noura, I'm going to come to you for this question, that kind of was it strictly convincing type way? Okay, there you go. So, humanity has been using tools ever since we picked up the first flint. Yeah, it's a long, long history that we have, at least 1 million years or something. Is AI just an extension of this, or is it something actually new that we're coming across?
I believe it's an extension of this. So we've been developing technologies, and society's been promoting this technology, advancing it further and further, and I believe, and I hate calling it AI because it's the term the public is using and it's currently very overused. We like to call it machine learning. And machine learning powered tools, they are the most advanced tools we been able to achieve until this decade, this era. And yeah, so it is what makes, like as Pete said, it reflects us as well. Because, okay, it's not only reflects our intelligence, also our ignorance when it's biased or unfair, because we train it, and we train it with our data. And if our data is biased, so it is biased, and we will keep working on that, criticizing that, working on that, advancing it further to reach a point of reliability. But yeah, I think it's technology as a concept has been there since ever, and we're advancing it further. And because AI is quite powerful, or machine learning is quite powerful right now, it puts a big responsibility on us as academics, companies, practitioners, to educate everybody, educate the public, the new industries that they want to use AI, how dangerous it is, and how useful it is at the same time. And if you know, and if you're transparent enough, you can report the pros and cons equally. Everybody will understand what they're using, how they use it, and the compromise they're offering from their privacy when they use these technologies. And we keep developing the technology further and advancing it, and hopefully at some point it will be able to reflect our creativity. And probably when we see, as Pete said, when you search for a doctor and you find that they're all male, white, Caucasian on Google, that's a reality shock for us. There's something here we need to change. We don't need to change AI, we don't need to change our algorithm. We need to change ourselves, our communities. We need to educate people. Yeah.
Well, that is fascinating. So it's a continuation also of technical evolution.
Yeah.
It's a reflection of who we are.
Exactly.
So if it is biased, it's our bias that it's right. Ahmed, follow that.
Well, I think so. It's an extension, but I understand where the confusion comes from. That it's just perceived as something new. Is that the growth of AI over the last years or last decades is really high. So what makes it look like it's something new? It's really coming very fast, and for us to perceive that is scary. I will be scared from people more than robots and AI, because we actually do much more worse thing than what we have as robots now. But when you think about that growth and why people like it's really scary for an economic singularity that we put off like lots of jobs at the end of that phase of AI, and we might lose our job. And automation is not about just we might lose our jobs. It's about like how fast we actually going to lose our jobs. So if, for example, like we're just like talking before the event about can we actually automate the high wage jobs like lawyers and or is it actually coming after like the low range wage jobs? But when you think about it, it's actually easier to make an AI not replace, but to some extent replace a lawyer, but it would be really difficult to replace a hairdresser, which it's at that low level, it's really difficult, and we might actually spend too many years to get to that extent. So it's scary, but we don't mind doing this. We don't mind losing jobs because to replace with other jobs, but the growth actually what makes it scary. I don't mind changing my career in 10 years' time, every 10 years, but I do mind like having a job in 6 months, and then it gets automated, and I have to change to something else, it gets automated again, and so on. That's that what makes it scary. But it's an extension, just like the growth rate is really high.
Excellent, thank you. Would you continue?
Yeah, so it definitely is a tool, I think, and like any other tool, it's just where that tool fits into the evolution of humans. So I always use my granddad as an example. My granddad was born in 1898, and he died in 1996, which was a hell of an innings. Fair play to him. And
I think you could have hung on for a bit longer.
yeah, well, exactly. Could have got the tongue, couldn't it? And Grandad Ted, if you think about the things that he saw in his life, so when he was born, there were no motor cars on the streets, very few people had electric lights. He witnessed, as well as things like world wars, he witnessed women getting the vote. He witnessed all kinds of social revolutions. He witnessed man on the moon, telephony, and then mobile telephony, all the way through to internet and Sky TV, all in one lifetime. So he went from horse and cart to watching Nottingham Forest on Sky 2, because that was his team, in one lifetime, via man on the moon.
I was rooting for him tonight.
Yeah. Well, you know, club. Anyway, and that's mental. That's clearly mental. And if you look at a graph of where technology is and where it's come from, you will see that very little happens for millions and millions of years, and then in a relatively short period of time, the acceleration of technology is just gone nuts. Gutenberg invented the press, 580, 590 years ago or something like that, and the printing press did not change for 560 odd years until the advent of desktop publishing. That was the greatest revolution since Gutenberg's press. That's a bonkers timescale for technology to evolve compared to how it evolves now. So things are going ridiculously rapidly, and part of the reasons that is all stuff you know about, Moore's law and the acceleration of technology and all that kind of stuff. But what it means is that some things like particularly when we're talking about AI, I think really one of the leaps in technology happened about 10, 15 years ago, which was deep learning. This idea of neural networks and networks that are set up to replicate the way that human brains make decisions and to try and copy that. And that has catapulted what we can do significantly. That's given us a game-changing technological edge. And I think you come into it from two directions. You're either an academic who is into this kind of stuff because you're impossibly clever and you're into its own sort of intrinsic value, which is great. Or you're an ignorant oaf like me who comes to it because it actually helps you get stuff done. I'm not here because I happen to love AI or I'm interested in data science or anything like that. I'm here because in the process of running a digital agency, I went to a challenge event that Sunderland Software City put on in association with Nissan. And Nissan's problem was when you buy a new car from Nissan and you drive it home, if there is a problem with that car, by the time your dealers have picked that car up, diagnosed the problem, told you what the problem is, got the part, sorted it out, given it back to you, and then reported it to the factory in Sunderland, that process takes 2 weeks. When you produce a car every 29 seconds, that's potentially 17,500 warranty claims all going off the line with exactly the same problem. If you've got a Twitter account, you bought a brand new car and it's broken down, you're probably going to slag them off on Twitter, so can we use the two to find, can we use social as a rewarding system for QA? So I came to this as a way to solve problems. I looked at it, realised that there were much cleverer people in the room than us with better data scientists, so got interested in natural language processing, and my interest has stemmed from there. And I think increasingly industry is coming round to the value that AI and deep learning in particular can offer you in organising some of the ubiquitous data that's out there, and to that extent it is very definite.
Excellent. I'm only about half the age of Grandpa Ted. The time I when children to play outside. Anyway, Philip.
Yeah, so broadly I kind of agree, but I'm going to disagree a bit for fun. So is it just a tool? Well, in many ways I think it is for all of the points that the panel have made. But I think in my own research interest, one where it becomes not quite the same as the tools that we've had in the past is that as AIs become more sophisticated, it becomes much more difficult to understand the why of why they've made a decision. So they're making decisions on very complex, very large data sets. So it's very hard to, you can't ask it why. What is the basis in that data that you've made that decision on? And this is something that we see in a corporate context. So when an AI is part of a decision-making chain, so people make some part of a decision, but the output of an AI contributes to that decision, it's very hard for those people to then turn around to that AI and say, well, why did you come to that conclusion about that individual? And I think as they get more sophisticated, that problem may increase. And I think that makes it a little bit different from the tools that we've seen in the past, which you do have some possibility of kind of taking apart. And where that interfaces again with my own interest is around discretion. So when you have humans and computers making decisions together, what do you do if you don't agree with the computer's decision? Can you go against that decision? In what context can you go against that decision is very interesting, I think, because of the difficulty of understanding what the basis of that decision is. Now, you could argue that maybe that's just the same as tools that we've already had, because a lot of the tools that we use, we might not really be able to understand how they made a decision anyway. But the difference is in the sophistication, I think, particularly as they approach something that becomes more like human-style intelligence, that you can't ask it the basis of what it's done.
Right, thank you for being controversial there. Before I come up to Ahmed on the next question, but what I'm going to take away from there is if you want a new car, blag about it on Twitter. Right. Okay, next question then. I'm going to start with you, Ahmed. We hear about AI is going to solve all of those problems. It's going to solve world hunger, fix peace, all that kind of thing. How can it ever possibly live up to this hype?
I don't think it will actually solve all problems or majority of them, but it will have something to do with them. So it will contribute somehow to solving problems. Like the amount of data that we collect now about many things, and we need to analyze it, and we don't have the tools yet to analyze this enormous amount of data. We have some tools, but we need more. And every problem that we need to gather data about it. So it will contribute to solving such problems, but it will not be the one thing that solves it at the end. And you can think of any problem that we have right now in the whole world, and I don't think it will be able standalone to solve any problems yet, the way that we see it now.
Okay, I was hoping Kanye said yes, but there you go, never mind. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's clearly a lot of hype about AI at the minute. For fun, I had a look at the Gartner hype curve. Everybody know the Gartner hype curve? It talks about technology.
Should I be not to go out for a night out with you?
Yeah, I know, right. We'll hang out with Steve while I work. His idea of a good night is a big data set on the line. Anyway, yeah, so I was looking at the Gartner hype curve, and I could find 7 explicit or implicit mentions of AI in the Gartner hype curve from last year, and they are all on that part of the graph that goes up towards the peak of whatever it is of what's it called? That peak of disillusionment or whatever it is, where
It's the trough.
yeah, it's the bit before the trough. Anyway, heightened expectations. That's it. The peak of heightened expectations. So we know that we're at a stage now where it's kind of people are talking about AI and think that AI can do more than it can, and it's going to go through the trough of disillusionment before it becomes useful. But it can still do some pretty cool stuff. So there's all kinds of AI out there. I mean, we've referenced how it's working in in medicine and how people are using pictures of retinas and being able to diagnose at a better rate than human doctors particular diseases, and it's being used in all sorts of areas quite happily. And I think even though we're only at narrow AI, some of the advantages that it has over humans at the minute is sort of continuous multiple learning, so the fact that you can have a bunch of computers together all doing the same stuff, which makes them much more powerful than human beings. But it's also the fact that inconveniently as human beings we have a habit of dying. So take the case of people looking at people's eyes to see if they have a particular disease. If you have a long and fruitful practice as an eye doctor person, here I'm on the technical terms here, then you might see 200,000 cases in your lifetime. When you have a neural network running for that kind of maths, you add a new computer to it, it's starting from day one, or you add a new instance, it's starting from day one, at least that level of data, probably more. So these computers, you can add to that knowledge, and it makes it more useful than kind of what's come before it. I think the other interesting thing about the hype is a lot of the talk about what's going to happen in the future. So you've got Dell Technologies reports saying that by 2030, 80% of the jobs that people do haven't been invented yet. So how the hell we educate our children to learn skills to do jobs that haven't been invented yet is a serious challenge. We've got other reports that are looking at what jobs are going to be obsoleted by that time. So Ahmed touched on it before about can we replace lawyers? Who's going to be the first to go? And certainly, wouldn't like to be a taxi driver in the year 2028 or whatever it is, when autonomous vehicles have kind of hit the market. So there's interesting stuff there. Is it hyped? Almost certainly yes. Is there reason for that hype? Absolutely yes. And this stuff has already hit the market. We're already able to do stuff with deep learning we weren't able to do previously.
Okay, thanks. If you're interested, if you look at some of the stuff from Virginia Mason, what that chain of hospitals has been doing in the United States with using deep learning to check people's history, prehistory for medical conditions, is really fascinating. Okay, hype then.
Will it solve all the problems? I think sci-fi has taught us that it's always a bit risky telling AI is to solve all the world's problems in case the solution is get rid of the humans. But that aside, I think I agree with Pete in many respects, actually, that I think there's a lot of potential in human and AI collaboration. Pete talked about the medical industry, which is a great example. Things like diagnostics, drug interactions, all that kind of thing. But I think I'll add into that really climate change. I think there's great potential for AI to assist with the analysis of the large kind of data sets that we may need to understand in order to kind of combat and potentially reverse or mitigate climate change. And there's actually a really good article in, I think it was Physics World, where, forgive me if that's wrong, but an AI system was used to analyse global vegetation shifts, which was a really powerful use of a very large data set. So I think things like that, we could see a lot of potential to address different kinds of problems, medical, large-scale global change, with a collaboration, rather than just AI being left to do it all on its own. I think there's a lot of virtue to come from collaborative efforts.
Okay, so Bruce Willis is going to solve all the world's problems. Is that right? Okay, good.
Yeah, Bruce Willis.
So I agree with Ahmed, like AI will help in every discipline, medicine, security, psychology. In every job there will be an AI assistant to it. But the problem with healthcare, although it's been applied somehow in research, it was able to achieve some good results. To be able to use these techniques in medicine, it will have to be called a medical device. It's very, very difficult to actually because as Phil pointed out, it's not explainable. At least the techniques we're using today, they're achieving outstanding results. There's no explainability aspect to it. So we can't explain to the patients why we're giving him this certain drugs. And so when things goes wrong, there's a huge problem. You'll go to court and you can't go through an AI agent anymore. We don't have these facilities yet. So AI is not allowed to take decisions when it's human lives at the edge. But we use it comfortably for climate change, to predict earthquakes or volcanoes. So in a case of a bad prediction, it's not the end of the world. We're not killing anybody. So yeah, I think AI does exist in every discipline right now. We'll keep developing this, especially now because we applied it. We know the current challenges we're facing, and we'll keep developing more understanding of these techniques and be able to hopefully at some point provide explainability as well, so people can't trust what they're using. They just use them blindly.
Okay, thank you. And I suppose truth is any tool that we use is both good and bad. Bread knife will cut bread and then chop somebody's head off in the next one. Sorry, bring the time down a bit there. Okay, how are we doing for time? Oh, good.
How many questions?
Well, I could go on all day, but there you go. It's when the audience reflect. How long have we got?
I think two more of your
Right, okay, two more, that's fine. Good. Right. Because we've got some social scientists among us, some lapsed, some failed, and there we go. But some have never been there. So social science is a very broad area, I'm told. Economics, sociology, social science, history, anthropology, psychology, and geography. So can we consider AI in such a wide context? It could actually be a technology that unifies all of these sciences.
Yeah, so I've already fessed up to being a lapsed social scientist and not actually knowing anything about it since the late 1990s. But as a middle-class, middle-aged, white, heterosexual male, I clearly have a strong opinion about this. So I nicked that guy from Steve last night off before. I think setting aside this idea that social sciences are already a messy continuum, where does geography or economic geography end and economics start? Where do historians and anthropologists diverge? I think the thing that they have in common is the scale of disruption that AI is going to bring across the board to both them as disciplines and to the society that they are seeking to understand. So, for example, PwC reckoned a couple of years ago that by 2030, AI will add something like 14% to global GDP. So that works out as $15.7 trillion. That's a lot of money coming into the world, and that raises some pretty fundamental questions about how we organise society. We've mentioned jobs and how a lot of jobs, particularly lower skilled jobs, are going to become obsolete. What does that do to society? We've already got Northern European countries experimenting with a state wage that they pay people. Are we going to see more of this? It raises really profound questions about how the benefits and burdens of this technology are distributed. So are there winners and losers? The way that society seems to be going at the moment is increasingly polarized, so fewer people have more of the wealth. If in the future AI is eating up jobs and generating wealth on its own, then it follows that the only way to win is to run an AI company, which is what I do. So how does that work? And how does sociology work in a world where none of us actually have jobs anymore? And bear in mind, at the minute, it's not just an economic problem. So there's loads of articles written about how we use our jobs and our status at work to define ourselves, to make up our personal identity, how we measure our happiness based on how well we're doing at work. In a post-work society, what does self-worth look like? And that is a very real prospect. We might see that in our lifetime. likely our children certainly will see at least a reduction in the amount that they have to work. And how do we get there? So obviously we are at that specific juncture in history for whom that is going to be a bit of a pain in the arse for us, because we're going to lose our jobs, and we're facing this change. It's kind of a bit like if you were around at the dawning of the Industrial Revolution, you were happily working in a farm. You're happily working in a farm somewhere, and somebody invents a tractor, and all of a sudden you're out of work. That's bad news for you if the only skills you have are digging and planting and drinking beer, in my experience of farms. So what are all these things going to do? We don't know, but actually in 100 years' time or 50 years' time, in a world where we've been through that process, it will be quite nice to be around reading poetry and listening to music and deciding what we want to do with our lives, deciding to value ourselves by the people we take care of, or the way that we bring up our families, or a set of value judgments that are different from the value judgments that we make today because we have to work for economic survival. So I think it's going to be a massively profound change. I don't know how it's going to affect sociology or geography or psychology or anything else like that, because I know nothing about those subjects as well.
But it doesn't stop you having an opinion, so
That's
right.
right.
Okay, Phil.
Well, academics are notoriously territorial, so I think the disciplines will probably persist. But I think it's right that it will disrupt those fields. It's a new methodology. It doesn't have quite the theoretical basis in those disciplines that it probably needs. So then it's a huge opportunity, right? So it's a disruptor, but as we know with disruptors in other contexts, they're not only are they threats, but they're an opportunity as well. So I think AI, in both what it can do in terms of, I use AI as a tool in my own social science research. I imagine that AI will be used across the social science disciplines to help us conduct research. But it will also be the subject of massive research, so the impact that it has on society will be interpreted through all of these different social science lenses, and they will help, hopefully, with our kind of transition into this slightly different world, slightly different way of being. So I don't know, I don't think it will unify them in the sense that it will just bring them all under the banner of the social science and they'll lose their identities, but it may unify them in the context of it being a new tool, but also it will unify them as a challenge for them to tackle in our societies at large.
Okay, thank you. So if you can't be the owner of an AI company, stick to academia, because that's going to be around for a while as well. Sounds good.
So I think social scientists, they're in hunger for AI. Whenever I speak with a social scientist, there's just the lack of tools. They know their problem. They know that AI can help them. They even can point at some paper or some example and say, we want to do similar thing, but we can't find the tools. So the only thing that they don't have the right tools, they don't have the right expertise. Obviously, they didn't do a computer science degree, and that's when we build collaborations with them and try to help them, whether with psychology, analyzing facial traits, predict emotions, with businesses, such as analyzing customer psychology, what to advertise, where, how, using these tools. So the problem, these tools currently are not for researchers or like even in the university, just off the shelf to go and use them. They're not that easy built, they're not friendly. There's still more in research aspect or product already developed that you can use, like the navigator or like text messages. So, some apps might tell you the sentiment of your text while you're sending it, or if it contains bully or not for teenagers to prevent them to be cyber smart. But can I have this tool and use it on my data? No, this tool does exist on that app. You use that app or nothing. So we need to fill this gap. We need to connect these dots between the social science, their needs, and what we're implementing right now. So what we implement can serve them best.
Excellent. So in many ways, the really exciting stuff will be in the grey areas between the different silos of it. Okay,
Yeah.
well, that sounds really interesting. Ahmed.
So the short answer to the question whether like AI will unify that big spectrum of social sciences is yes.
Oh, thank you.
But it will not only unify them, it will actually bridge between the social sciences and like the natural sciences. And what I mean by that there is always an argument between social scientists and natural scientists that social science is not an exact science. And it's 1 + 1 not necessarily equal 2 in social sciences. And my beliefs on this is that it's an exact science, but it's not yet. We haven't developed the tools yet that would enable us to research social sciences with like great predictability, if you know what I mean. Like for example, like natural sciences, we develop a thermometer to measure the temperature, but we don't have that ability in social sciences. And the only way to do this in social sciences that we need AI, that we need to analyze huge amount of data because we are dealing with humans. And humans, like, we cannot, most of the time, we cannot predict what they're gonna do as a standalone and also when they interact with each other. So it's really, really difficult, and the tools that we have at the moment, if it's not for AI, we wouldn't be able to develop like good research around social sciences. And the other thing, so it's unifying from that perspective that we can get lots of data and we can do social sciences in that spectrum, and also like the bridge between social science and natural science. That if we go in the very past, there wasn't actually a specification of the science. We used to have like a polymath, like Da Vinci, Al-Hazen, where they are just like they are in very wide spectrum of sciences. And they were able to do that in the past because like original ideas were just like you can go and just like take an idea and discover something new. It was easy, but now it's really difficult. And over those years, we broke down those areas of sciences into small pieces. Like this is actually economics, and inside economics there is behavioral economics, which we can take it on the side. And inside economics there is a finance. But now it used to be financial economics, but now it's finance as a standalone. But this is not how the world works. All these, we hear now are like interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and the way to move forward, that we need to understand the whole universe as interconnected between all these sciences. I cannot imagine like if we don't have AI and that we would be able to do that. We don't have the ability. Our mind cannot process that data, cannot generate that data, cannot process it. So the only way forward is actually to have AI to unify it and also to bridge all sciences together.
Okay, thank you very much. What I am convinced is that humans are not logic creatures. It's very difficult to apply logic. Anytime? One more, do you? One more, right, okay. So I'm going to go over there. I'm going to come to you. You were first on this one. Okay, so this is our last question. So politics has become very polarized. You may have noticed, I don't know if you have, but people have become suspicious of big government, big corporations. They fear technologies, things like facial recognition, that's been theoretically used in a totalitarian way. Well, of course they're not. Who knows that? And so how do we get the right balance between innovation and civilization?
Yeah, so I want to ask people here who applied for a GDPR request at all. None. That's you. Great.
There's always one.
So, two. Yeah. So see that because we are aware of how dangerous these techniques and how harmful it can be to us, and this is our data. So how can you allow someone to borrow your arm or use your leg? It's our data. It's our property. And it's been used by all companies, whether we like it or not. And thanks to the GDPR, now we can stop this. We can put a request. We can ask them to remove our data. Don't use it on training your models. I don't want my face to appear on Facebook training data for their facial recognition techniques. For example, because maybe we don't know, but like most of our data are used, or whether on Facebook, on Twitter, whether if you're walking around and there's a CCTV camera, they captured you. It is AI powered. They know how you're feeling, you're stressed or not. Maybe if you also diagnose you with depression or not depressed. Seriously, also predict your ethnicity, age, gender. We don't know anything about these techniques, and we're allowing them to use our data, our property, and they didn't take our consent for that. So we do need more laws to protect us. Also, we need to speak with the public more, because if you know these techniques, if you know how helpful it can be to you, then how to use it smartly without compromising your privacy, compromising your data. Because anyone also can use this data to attack you. Or like fake news, for example, generating fake news. This is one of the biggest achievement in the dark AI sector, where we can generate fake news. You can't actually know whether it's fake news or not. Fake images we can generate. We don't need actually now to steal someone's identity. We can create facial images that never ever existed, and human being can't distinguish between fake and real. So the thing is, we need to get the public to know this, to how harmful, how to use it, how to harness it, and also to ask the government to democratic countries and how to protect us, how to generate these laws to protect us, not to allow the companies to use our data without our consent. Whether it's CCTV, whether it's facial recognition, like currently there is a plug-in medium for Amazon recognition software, and trying to prevent them from selling it to law enforcement. Do you want your face to be sold to law enforcement? Do you want the law enforcement to know who you are, what you're doing, where, everything about your life? So we're trying to, these techniques exist. Are law enforcement allowed to use it? Also, it can be leaked to organizations that work in the dark. Are they allowed to use it? How to protect that? How to harness that? So it is very, very useful tools, but they can be as well weapons against our society. So the solution is really educating the public, speaking more with the public. AI is not that alien. Everybody is using. You're all using it in your everyday life, every second, every hour. You know, most of you, your GPS tracker is still on your phone, and all this data is being processed by AI agents on the cloud. We're all using it. We just need to be smart how to use it, when to stop it, how to delete our data. We need to have a stronger voice to the governments to protect us, to have more laws to when to allow companies to access the data and when not to allow it. And transparency as well. So with the company, especially with the overhype now, everybody's claiming to use AI. Unfortunately, not everybody's using AI. A lot of these companies just saying we use AI to secure funding and to get credibility, or to enhance its image. So we need more transparency to what's getting used, how publish the tool. You can't just say, I have my tool, it's my intellectual property, therefore nobody can access it. Because if we don't know what your tool is doing, how can we protect ourselves from it? Transparency and more laws to protect us.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Yes.
I'm sure you've heard it said many times before, but if the product is free, you are the product.
Exactly.
Right, oh my God, Peter. That's what you didn't.
Wow. Mixing it up for the last question. I'll get a copy of that. So, I guess implicit in your question is the question: are people right to be fearful of AI, or what is it about AI that people should be fearful of? I agree with much of what Noura said there. I think there are two threats from AI. There is an intrinsic and an extrinsic threat. So, The extrinsic threats are basically what if it gets into the wrong hands? What if bad actors use AI to do bad things? And I think the likelihood of this happening is 100%. History shows us that bad people do bad things with all kinds of technologies, whether that's people in Sri Lanka blowing up churches and hotels, whether it's the Nazis trying to build nuclear bombs in the Second World War, or I don't know if anybody's been following Carol Codwaller on the Observer's writer, who delivered a TED talk the other day to Silicon Valley and sat in front of Zuckerberg and basically blamed him for Brexit and said that Facebook was the biggest existential threat to liberal democracy in the world right now, and they're doing nothing at all about it. And we are still getting to grips with these mobile technologies that are 10, 15 years old. So it's going to be at least another 10, 15, 20 years until we get to grips with a proper regulatory framework and an effective way of dealing with AI, probably longer. So yes, that's definitely going to happen, and we have to get used to the fact that is going to happen. Phil before touched on the problem, and Noura as well touched on the problem of transparency, that the fact that a lot of AI at the minute is a black box, and how can we protect ourselves against AI if we don't know what it's doing, is what Noura said. I completely agree with that. But there are strategies. People are starting to work out ways of dealing with this. My favourite is something called the Hamlet strategy, which is that you build in a piece of AI with its own internal monologue, so it can explain to you what it's doing. It's a brilliant title, and very good with Hamlet. And it's also it's quite a good idea. So I think there's an extrinsic risk. I think the intrinsic risks, again, we've touched on some of those. So yes, there is no doubt that bias is a huge problem in AI. There's somebody referenced something close to this before. This idea that computers aren't making decisions for us at the minute, but they are informing the decisions we make. So there is a very famous case of a piece of AI in the US that looked at convicted criminals and recommended to a judge how long they should get, what kind of punishment they should have, and flag their likelihood to re-offend. And when they looked at the results coming out, they found that it was massively underestimating the risk for white people and massively overestimating the risk from black people. So it was basically race asked 100 questions, and race wasn't part of it, but it had on its own become racist, which is, clearly bias is a terrible thing. But bias already exists. Bias is everywhere in our lives at the moment. People with a body mass index above 30% get paid less than people who are thinner. Women get paid less than men. Bias is absolutely everywhere. And we know the problems of bias, and it should be something that, with the right regulatory framework and with a concerted effort, it should be something that we should be able to get around. So that's not an excuse for not using it. And I think the other thing that's interesting about this is the idea of agency. So it's about this idea of how do we equip an AI world with the morals necessary to pick our way through some of these problems. And we all know the example of an autonomous vehicle that is programmed to, what do? If it sees an old person walking down the street, it can tell this is an old person from the speed that they're travelling, from their gait, from all kinds of reasons that we might not know why it can tell it's an old person because of the transparency problem, but it can say it can spot an old person and a young person. Is an old person's life worth less than a young person's life? If there are two old people and one young person, does it take out the old people if it's got a crash? Does it take out the young people? How do we make these decisions? And there are different ways of doing it, so we either just hard code it in based on what we think, or we give the computer a ethical framework, or we give it all of the ways that we've developed our own morality, and we let the AI develop its own morality. And I think all three are flawed, and none of them are a perfect answer. But what's really interesting is, at the minute, owning a piece of AI is a bit like owning a dog, in the sense that if a dog attacks somebody, dogs can always be better trained. If I own a dog and it attacks somebody, it's my fault and I get prosecuted. If If a piece of AI makes a moral decision about something and gets it wrong, and bear in mind humans get it wrong all the time, so we can expect AI to get it wrong, who is then responsible? Is it the owner of the AI? Is it the AI itself? And there are a bunch of really sort of tough ethical questions that we need to answer to get to the bottom of some of these so that we can ensure that that moving forward people aren't suspicious about AI. But console yourself with this thought. We are now in the wild west of AI. Things are only going to get better from here. This is as messy and scary and difficult as it's going to be. And as we get better at using it, as it becomes more and more prevalent, we will learn ways of doing it. And I think Noura's example of GDPR is an excellent example because whilst for most of us involved in digital agencies, GDPR was a massive pain in the arse because it completely changed the way that most things in marketing and communications run. Actually, it was a massive step for the individual rights of human beings and your ability to do something about the corporations that hold your data. And actually, for a first pass of legislation, what it did was quite profound. And it's quite a tool, and that's our first tool. And yes, the law is way behind where the market is on this, and it's going to be decades before it catches up. But we just need to feel our way through and get through this messy period, because what's the alternative? We can't put the genie back in the bottle. It is happening, and we have to muddle our way through and work out how to do it in a way that people come along with.
Okay, thank you. So the toothpaste out of the tube, is it?
It
It's
is.
not going to go like here. Okay, so we've learned about the dark AI, we've learned about the wild west of AI, wild AI, now, I'm going to go with Philip.
As an enabler of a sort of totalitarian regime, it could be. The sort of precision analysis of individuals that AI can do is quite scary. So in the context of corporate surveillance, which mirrors a lot of the sort of national security surveillance that we see, there are AI systems that essentially baseline every person's behaviour within an organisation. So when you come to work, what devices you interact with, what doors you go through, when your sort of day-to-day pattern of usage of the corporate network, it's called pattern of life data, is baselined. And if you deviate significantly from that baseline, the AI will flag you as of interest. It won't say why you're of interest. It will just say that your behaviour has become anomalous. It's different from what it was before. Perhaps someone should go and investigate why that might be. And that presents a problem. So the same kind of technology could be deployed in a national security setting. You could become interesting by changes in the pattern of your life, basically. But how do you argue against that designation is very difficult. So if you're in the, if your boss comes to you and says the computer thinks that you're now a security hazard, you would go, no, I'm not, and then he would go, well, that's what all the security hazards say. There's the door, essentially. And the same thing happens, if you're classified as of interest by the state, so potentially a terrorist or something like that. How do you argue against that designation is very difficult. How do you say, no, I'm not, I'm a perfectly normal person, or whatever it might be. So I think that is really interesting. And what we do with that, and the extent that we allow our sort of nation states the capacity to use this and deploy this technology, we shouldn't only think about it in the context of now. We may think that technology deployed in certain situations is fine, because in many ways our government and our institutions are quite strong in defending our sort of personal interests. But it may not be the case in the future, which is something very much worth thinking about. And just on the GDPR thing, in the context of law enforcement, GDPR does not apply. So the data that they can collect, the regimes that they're allowed to keep it for, the length of time they're allowed to keep it for, and what they're allowed to do with it is very different in the context of law enforcement, because that's seen as a legitimate government activity than it is for a private company. So although you can be asked to be forgotten by Facebook, you can't ask your state to forget you, which in many ways is very reasonable, like a criminal, for example. So I think, the old saying, nothing, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. I think doesn't really do this problem justice, because everyone has something that they quite like to be hidden, and you don't know the context in which you should fear it into the future as well. And I think as we develop these technologies and they get deployed in much wider context, that's something that we really have to bear in mind.
Excellent, again. You have the honour, the last person.
Thanks. So I think this is a really difficult question. It's not an easy to answer, and it's not yet the time to be able to answer it. But the solution could be easily as Phil said, like the legislation is really important. But beside that, the awareness for the public, I think this is the way forward. And educating children in schools on what data that is getting collected from interacting with a very simple device, or like a complicated device, or just walking in the street, and what data is collected and how actually it could be used is very important. Because once we get like maybe 10 years down the line, we will discover lots of problems. We'll see like bad people using it in a different way, and then we can increase the legislation. And talking about the GDPR, this is a great step, but it's not enough. And when you think about the data is getting collected, and for example, companies saying, well, we are actually excluding personal identifying information before processing the data. And I tend to see this as, yes, they are removing this kind of data that makes it 100% me, like the person who is analyzing this data, knowing that it's 100% it's me. But let's say that it happens that you're one of you like working on my on a data set, and my data is there, and there is a location point, location data point, and my mobile phone like collecting these locations. No, but let's say that it's collecting this data, and it happens that you are in the same room like me, and there is 1/100 probability that it's me. Like the probability is 1/100 that it's me if you have seen me here, and you know the location that I've been here at that specific time in history. So you know it actually there's more probability that it's me than anyone else from the whole people in Newcastle or in the whole world. So it's any data point, it has some sort of personal identification, but the probability is lower than the other. So all the data that we have on each other now, like that we collect in businesses and from personal or business perspective, it's really difficult to manage it now and like put some sort of legislation. The GDPR doesn't cover that yet, but eventually we need to deal with it. The other thing that like about that, how actually we might, while we are doing this, we might harm ourselves. While we are doing like AI, even in AI, like we think that we're actually removing some bias, we might harm ourselves. So we need to think about it. And I'll give you an example. So as I said, like my PhD research was on understanding investor sentiment and how it actually affects the stock market returns and stock market prices. And we know now, like after like long time of debating that people are rational, that we know now that we actually have some kind of irrationality. We have cognitive biases in our head that we use to get our way through life. We use some heuristics. We are not like using them doing things in the most rational way. And for example, like someone might have an Apple stock in his investment portfolio, just to go to the pub at night and say, well, you know what, look, I have actually Apple in my portfolio. And that doesn't mean that Apple actually is a good investment or is a bad investment. It just like he or she like chose this in a totally different reason than just actually making money. And that puts a pressure, and we call them noise traders because they put pressure on the price. They either inflate it, so overvalued or undervalued. So in this example of Apple, it's be overvalued, and that might actually create the bubble, and we'll see lots and lots of problems in the financial crisis. And seeing that we can actually remove that bias, and we have like algorithm trading. So the algorithms like actually trading with each other, no human interaction, no bias here. But when you think about it, what makes us like unique as human, that we are unpredictable. And if we have machines, AI agents dealing with each other and they predict each other, it's not like playing tennis against each other. If you're playing tennis against the wall, so you predict what actually the response. But if you have like two walls playing tennis against each other, it's really hard. Yeah. So they might clash at the end because the way to do it, the fun of it, that we are predicting the market. I have different belief than you. So when we trade on the market or play tennis, we have different way of doing things. But when algorithms are doing it, removing the bias, that actually creates a good thing and a bad thing in the first place, we might reach a clash and put some legislation on this. We might harm ourselves as long as, as well as like protecting ourselves.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to go now and tell my lawyer friends, and somebody said GDPR was not enough. So that was good. Yeah. So my voice says, they'll stop worrying about it. It's out there anyway. Nobody knows everything about it, so there you go. So before I move on to the questions, then can I just say thank you very much to the panel. So Phil, Noura, Ahmed, and Peter. So round of applause for them. We didn't get through all the questions, so there you go. So how long have we got, John? About 15 minutes, okay. So what I'm going to do is ask questions on the floor, and I'm only going to get to ask one of you to answer them in a different round. Okay. First question, please.
Tom. Hello. So looking at things like the p-value and q-values that have been held against like research in the past, we know there's been a lot of issues around the like data set, as you might put it, on a lot of even social science research, of people going back, re-looking at the stats and saying, actually, this just fundamentally can't have happened. And that was because of the bias of the people funding research. So it was trying to push research through to make it legitimate. Do you think the data sets that are being built right now, being extrapolated by AI, are going to create this same kind of like, oh no, we need to go back and rethink the beginnings in 10 years? Are the problems we have now going to just get massive once we start looking back at these data sets?
Right, which one of you would like to? I've ruled myself out of this question, by the way. There you go. Peter, I don't think I'd seen you. I think it's more than that. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, responding to that, we're already there. So, we already acknowledge the bias in our data set, and there is already a fair database for faces, for example, with enough enough diversity. It is called the fair facial recognition data set. So we're already there. We already recognize the challenge. We already recognize how biased and unfair algorithms can be, depending on the data set, and we're working on that. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Who's next? This lady over there. And then I'll come to you, Adam. That's all right.
Hello. I'm a
Hi, I'm an ethnographic researcher. Don't have a lot to do with data sets in terms of numbers. Is there any role for qualitative researchers within AI in the industry? From an industry perspective, this may go to Pete.
Please, great. I have a question for you, Peter.
Get it. So the question I got asked was, this has nothing to do with science, can you answer it? So we're dealing with qual data all the time. So we deal with unstructured text, and that is by definition qualitative. And what's interesting about the stuff that we're dealing with is we can find words, but you can use all the same words in a completely different order, and it means completely different things. So the example we always give is one of our clients is Northumbrian Water, and they get fined 23 grand above a certain threshold for problems with taste and smell. So we're listening for stuff like, this water tastes like crap, and that's worth a lot of money to them, and they're really interested in people saying that because they can accept the problem before they complain. Take all those words, put it in a different context. This crap tastes like water, almost certainly American lager. So you can have all the same words, different context, and it means something completely different. And actually what's really interesting about this is the way that the usage of language differs between older people and younger people, or differs between people in the north or people in the south, or people in the US and people in the UK, or how people use language differently in different languages. And there are any number of angles to research this and things to look at that don't rely on quant data. And actually for me, the most interesting stuff is the qual stuff, because people talk about big data all the time, and they talk about AI all the time. Most of the time they are talking about numbers. And numbers are easy, because we know what a number means. We know that a 6 is higher than a 4, and we know that a 10 is a 10 and a 2 is a 2. We don't know what's cause and what's correlation, and we can interpret those numbers, and that's where the fun is. But 80% of the data, the big data in this world is unstructured text. Obviously, I'm hugely biased. I work in that area, but it's true. There's so much text out there about people, and that is much harder to understand, because to understand it, you need to know about context and about about all kinds of things outside of just those words there. And so yes, absolutely there is a role, and there's any number of things that you can do, any number of areas that you can research. And AI will be both a friend and a foe to you in the pursuit of that end. Did that answer your question?
Okay, I think Adam over here.
If I may add something on that question, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah, okay.
So
if you're quick, Ahmed.
Yeah, very quick. So I think just like to reflect on Pete's answer. The main problem that we see a lot in doing machine learning, in explainable machine learning, it's the algorithms and also like expert knowledge, like domain expertise. And when many data scientists or many machine learning experts are using data and developing models to do things, and then they don't actually understand what this data means, that makes it really, really hard. And we cannot explain it, we cannot interpret the results. But we need like people who are actually domain expertise. Doesn't have to do anything with the data, but like the qualitative research and so to understand and how to actually automate this part and how to take it on board for machine learning. So it's really, really connected, and this is what the data science world needs more right now.
Okay, sorry, let's move on.
Hello. There's been a talking point that I think almost all of you brought up, that it's bad that AI can't explain the reason behind a decision. And it's also a problem in the financial world. You've got robot advisors and regulated advisors need to be able to explain why they make decisions. However, how many humans have made a decision based on nothing but a hunch, a gut feeling? Detectives do it all the time. So I guess I would put it back that in itself is not the problem. Making a bad decision might be a problem. However, in the true sense of machine learning, a bad decision gets fed back into the system so that that decision doesn't get made again. So that's a question.
That looks down your street.
Okay, yeah, so you're right, and it's not just AIs that can't explain themselves. There are other tools that we use, but the problem comes essentially with liability. So when you need to blame someone, if a detective makes a bad call, that's you go to that person, and if they can't explain why they've thrown someone in jail, they've got a problem. Right? And it's the same, I think Noura mentioned, the medical context. If a surgeon does a procedure but they can't explain why they've done that procedure, they're going to be in trouble. And as society, we've settled on that arrangement being essentially okay, subject to numerous litigation and court cases and things like that. Where AI presents as an additional problem is that we're not able, so it's a very sophisticated decision-making process where we can't attribute responsibility. So, oh, well, the AI told me to do it. So is that my fault? Is it the AI's fault? Is it the person who programmed the AI? Is it the people who collected the data that the AI was trained on? where does that responsibility lies, where it becomes particularly difficult. But you are right in a sense that it's just an extension of that problem. And the other thing that's very interesting in this context is if AIs learn off each other, and that causes an incident, like so self-driving cars that can teach each other about road conditions, if that then caused an accident, well, is it your car? Is it you as the person in the car? Is it the builder of that car, or the one that gave you the information that your car responded to? So attributing the sort of the blame, essentially, becomes really very difficult.
Just on your point of the AI made me do it, how many cases of people driving into a river because their sat nav told them to go
Well,
there?
quite a few, yeah, or off a cliff almost, yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to have to go. Became a granddad on Sunday, and I need to go sort something out. Thank you very much. I had very little involvement with it. There you go. Do you want to carry on with this, or do you want to pick this up?
Is there any more questions?
There is. So, Charles, can I ask you to take over then?
Oh.
But thank you very much for your attention. Okay, cheers.
Hi, just wondering what role do you think design plays in AI, such as design principles, and how can we ensure that the regulations that you guys have mentioned can be enforced in nation states that perhaps don't follow the same rule set?
So, who would be best to answer that?
Maybe collaboratively, all
Yeah,
together.
go ahead.
So currently there is the GDPR. It's not enough, obviously, but there is nothing like we can't make sure that our data is not used in any way or another. The thing is now is the time to educate the public about the importance of their data and the importance of these decisions or recommendation system that we're using. And then it's our call. Do we need protection? If a thief came to your house, you'd call the police, right? I mean, now we can't call anybody. Do you want to call anybody? Do you want to call the police? Do you want to ask for protection? Do you want to ask for regulations to regulate the use of AI, and also to probably not yet explain decisions, but explain what these tools are being used for. Well, AI is not all unexplainable. We'd say like maybe 50-50. We've been using AI since 1950, and it's all explainable. We explain, AI can explain the results. Currently, the hype of nonlinearity and deep learning offers the unexplainability. But can we ask the tool to at least tell us what it's doing, what the features that they're using? So am I happy for my gender to be used in a job interview prediction of the results? Is that okay? Is that ethical? So it's still early time for that, but it's the more pressure, more education to the public, more pressure we can put on the government and the companies as well. Because like I mentioned, Amazon with their facial recognition system that they're planning to operate for law enforcement authorities, that's not okay. Because you can't opt out your data out of that. As he said, you can't ask the state to forget you. Once your face is there, your face is there forever. Is that okay? Do we give consent? So there is a petition, and that's our role as a society: create petitions, protest, object, and ask for protection at this early stage before it's too late.
I think your specific question was about design, and I think where we are now, design has a huge role to play. So the analogy we used before about my granddad seeing cars being invented. Imagine somebody invents a car, there's a few of them driving around, not a problem. At the point Ford's Model T Ford comes out and everybody's starting to adopt cars, clearly that's a problem. You've got cars hurtling into horses, and you need to work out which side of the road you're going to drive on. You need things like traffic lights, and you need to codify a set of instructions and rules, otherwise you'd have chaos. You just have cars driving around in all directions. I think where we are now, we've invented cars, and there's cars starting to go on the roads, and we don't yet have traffic lights or driver's licenses and all that kind of thing in an AI context. And what that means is, while we have this disjunct between legislation and where technology is and what we can do with technology, it is incumbent on the people working in the area to act morally. So with the technology we have at Word Nerds, there's a lot that we could do that we choose not to do because we don't think it's ethical, we don't think it's fair. We have a little test in the office which is, if a human being could achieve the output of what we're doing, albeit with X thousand hours worth of work or whatever, then unless there is a specific rule against it, we will do it. And if it's something a human being couldn't reasonably do, we wouldn't do it. And that's on the yardstick. Not everything falls into it. But there's an awful lot that we could do that, is a bit squiffy and a bit iffy. And you only need to look at Cambridge Analytica and all of the stuff that happened there with the Brexit stuff and things like that to look at what goes wrong when that kind of moral activity isn't designed in a design stage. So it's a really important question because right now design is our own defence from it in most cases.
I think where design also has a role is the explicit documentation and assumptions around how something was done, which is, you've talked about AI being inherently not very transparent, but actually your design decisions when building an algorithmic process could be documented to a very systematic, high quality level, which may then help with some of the issues around understanding how that system actually works. So things like safety critical systems, aeroplanes, etc. The documentation around how they're designed and built is extremely detailed. Nothing like that exists in the AI world. But you could do it, and that would potentially offer some help in understanding actually how these things work, or how they are working in the concept they're deployed.
Do you have anything to add? We've got time for one more question, which I'll pass the microphone out, and then the vote team poppy served at the back afterwards.
So congratulations on a great event. One of the most important parts of society is health and well-being. And it's great to hear some comments about medicine and health. So I'm a surgeon and an app developer involved in digital really locally. And over the last 2 decades, I've looked at and documented the rise of various different types of technology that's engaging with healthcare and apps, wearables, VR, AR. And at every one of those junctions, we've been told about how that's going to revolutionize healthcare and society. And almost uniformly, it hasn't quite delivered as much as it should have done. And it's almost got stuck at a very low level of aspiration. One of the main issues has been trust, and one of the issues has been consent. And AI has that problem in droves. So how do we regulate a device which evolves and learns every time someone stamps it as safe and becomes a different device? How do we establish that trust? And is there a way of regulating AI so that it can be used in a healthcare setting?
So I'm currently working on a healthcare project with a healthcare startup in the Northeast, and one big aspect about the AI product we want to deliver is transparency and explainability. So there is currently a great amount of effort put into explainability in these black box models and how we can give more reliable answer and also create trust between the patients and the doctors themselves using the product and the machine learning product. And how can we explain why this patient needs to take these drugs, or why do he or she needs to go to see a doctor first thing tomorrow, or the surgery can't happen. Also, is there any demographical bias for patients in specific health centers, and why do we think, if it exists, then why, and how can we prevent that or help people? So there is currently, research is currently working hard on satisfying this problem and working on offering explainability and transparency. So most of the funding currently from research councils go to explainability and transparency. it's the era of applying AI and saying, whoa, amazing stuff, cutting edge results is over. At least for research, it's over. And we're now trying to move forward, explain results, say what's reliable, what's not, what is okay to be used for gaming, where it's, bad prediction is all right, and what is not okay or okay to be used in healthcare or security as well. Because in security is exactly the same. Is there a terrorist? Is that a terrorist person? Is there going to be attack? When? Where? How? Can you just put people in jail randomly or suspects? That's the bad people. So yeah, so currently the main effort is on explainable AI. And I said before, AI existed since 1950. We're building on that. It's just the hype existed now. Because we have the hardware to support our algorithms. Before they needed years of training, now they need days, or you still need days, now they need minutes. So that's the thing. Now we have the hardware, we achieved what we wanted to achieve, now the industry is a bit taking over with, okay, applying AI. Now as researchers, our duty is to deliver on explainability and trust. So yeah, hopefully in the next decade, we will be able to deliver to the health sector trustworthy tools.
So I think like something that Pete and Noura touched at the beginning, the answer to the first question. The problem is not with the hardware itself, it's just like the data that it's fed that will actually train and like learn. And like looking at the health data is the same like looking at the other data. And it learns from us. And it learns from the data that we produce in the first place. And solving the problem itself in the real world will eventually has something to do with solving it with the models, with the algorithms, and will make it more explainable. So, for example, the gender, like if there is a gender bias in jobs and interviewing, if we remove this from the real world, so this will be a training data that will eventually fit to the algorithm, and the algorithm will figure out that, well, actually gender is not an important feature here. Let's just drop it out, so it will not be able to use it to make a decision for us. So it's eventually, if we solve many of the real world problems, the data that we produce would be good enough to have less bias or reinforcing the bias from the model or the hardware eventually.
Yeah. Again, with the caveat that I know precisely what's all about the healthcare sector, I think Ahmed and Noura have explained why the improvements we need to make with the actual technology before it becomes more and more useful. I think what was interesting about the question was that there's an uptake piece. There's a bit about, okay, we've proven some of it, but why is this stuff not being bought? Why is it not being implemented? And I think there is a fundamental difference in the way that younger people and older people care about data and the way that their data is used. So even in our office, where we probably have a much younger demographic, the laissez-faire attitude that the younger members of the office have to the way that their data is used staggers me, to the point where they all follow each other on those kind of find my iPhone, where's my mate's things, and they know where each other is, and when somebody's somewhere that they're not expected to be, they're texting them saying like, oh, you're at the cinema, are you on a date, who are you with, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. These hugely intrusive kind of things that they're allowing to happen to them, they just don't care. And they're quite happy for their data to be out there because they've been brought up in this world, and I was brought up in a world where there was huge libertarian debates about your right to be unidentified and unidentifiable, and as we've already said, all of that stuff is out there, and we can pretty much tell what's going on. What you need then is context and proportionality. So, am I happy for Google to know how I go home, what my mode of transport is, the route that I take, how long it takes me, all that kind of stuff? I am, because that feeds all of its stuff about telling you when there's a traffic jam and stuff like that. Would I want that information to go to a local gang? Absolutely not, because they could then stop me at the traffic lights and steal my very cheap watch. So there's a whole context thing, and I wonder whether, and it's a question because you'll know better than me, I wonder whether the people that are making the decisions about what is bought and what isn't, about what is used and what are maybe older people that have a very different contextual framework for dealing with these decisions about data, and we just see it in a different way, and I wonder whether it's a generational thing, and in 20, 30, 40 years' time, this stuff will be everywhere because younger people aren't as freaked out by the idea of their data being out there because they've got it.
I think one additional, I think that your question touched on, was the additional problem of systems that learn essentially on the job. So they adapt to new information as it arrives in the context that they're being used. So in a medical situation, that's very interesting because would that new information that the learning algorithm, the AI, picks up on affect its decision, and how is something that I know makes insurance companies very nervous because the system is changing. So in the context of a medical device that is validated to work in a particular environment, it's validated in a particular state, so its learning state has been validated in a way. So if you're adding new information, adding learning to that process, it's changing. And I think that, I don't have an answer for you, but I know that that's one particular problem the insurance industry has with autonomous systems for health, is that they're not, the system that was delivered on day one is not the system that is there after it's been used. I think that creates a big problem. Same for autonomous vehicles as well.
Yeah, but machine learning by definitions are adaptive, so we'll learn from new data you offer it. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much indeed. I'm ready for a cup of tea, I don't know about you. But I didn't want to close the proceedings without saying a big thank you to some people. Phil has already escaped, but I wanted to thank him. I will find another way of doing that, through artificial intelligence or not. But thanks to our panel for giving some fantastic, comprehensive and articulate answers to everything that's thrown at them today. To Phil, to Noura, to Ahmed and Pete. Thank you very much. And also, thanks to Charlotte, who's just been up here a moment ago, whose inspiration this event was. It's been a fantastic event. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Could you put your hands together for all of them?